Hello, and welcome to the C3 podcast, Code Conscious Conversations. I'm Dr. Lisa Piper here with Wendy Cohn-Osborne, and we are the founders of Code Health. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the C3 podcast, and today we are here with Leslie McGuirk, who is a well-known medical astrologer, and she is an author of The Power of Mercury, published by HarperCollins. She's been teaching astrology at 5-star spas around the world for 20 years, and she is also recognized as a person of credibility along with Nobel scientists. So welcome, Leslie, to our show. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
We met you in Boulder, Colorado, and we took a morning hike with you up the mountain. It was very special. And we enjoyed watching you speak about medical astrology on your panel. And, you know, when we were speaking, I said, you know, I heard about medical astrology while I was in school, and I was very intrigued by it. So can you just expand on it? What is medical astrology, and, you know, what do you do?
Well, it used to be that astrology and medicine were very connected. Hippocrates, who wrote the Hippocratic Oath that all doctors take, he actually put in as part of the oath that any doctor who doesn't practice astrology along with the medicine is not a doctor but a fool. So it was part of the Hippocratic Oath, which they removed, and anyone can Google that. So long time ago, it was part of the medical system. And Carl Jung, who is a well-known psychologist, he used astrology for every single patient that he worked with. So for mental health reasons, it's super important. I've been working with mental health professionals for over 25 years because I am not able to treat people, but I'm able to help diagnose things. So I look at myself as the diagnostic person, and the therapist are the mechanics. And there's been a huge amount of interest with doctors coming to me trying to figure out, how the heck did you do what you did with my patient? We've had people who no one else could seem to figure out what was going on. And in 1 hour, I give the clue to these seemingly impossibly difficult medical conditions that no one understood. So the way that it works is that astrology is basically an electromagnetic blueprint of where everything was at the moment you took your first breath. So it gives a doctor or an astrologer your owner's manual. So I can't imagine trying to get healthy without knowing the basic elements of how you were designed and how you were created. And what the astrology can do is it can show whether or not you were born with imbalances, or if they came because of trauma, or if health issues developed just because of weather patterns or accidents. But there's always a way out. And I know you both agree with this, that the body knows how to heal if we just give it the right medicine or the right herbs or whatever. There's always some way to figure it out. But astrology is the quickest way I know to get to the root causes of physical and mental problems that a lot of times regular doctors can't see, because an astrologer's got this very unusual bird's eye view on your human pattern that you've got. And because I've had a lot of health issues myself, it's probably why I have focused more on helping people at the physical and mental level. So it's probably why I'm a lot different than other astrologers too, just because of my own journey.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of us got into where we are today because of our journey that took us and led us here. Sometimes, you know, for us, it was a pain to purpose also. So that's really beautiful. So I have a question. You know, when you get your chart read, you need to have certain pieces of information for the astrologer to be able to provide you with everything that they're looking at. So what are the things that you need to provide to the astrologer for the astrologer to give you a proper chart?
So you need your birth date and year. And it's amazing how many people don't have that, especially if you're from the Middle East, or if you were a child in China. It was delivered at the, fire station. You don't have your exact birth date. So that's very difficult to do charts for people who don't have their birth date. But the birth date is key, and the place where you were born, because the sky was different over New York City on the day you were born than it was in South Africa. So we need to have the place as well. And then the final thing we need is your birth time. Now, a lot of people don't have their birth time. The chart is still accurate, 75 to 80% accurate without a birth time. I can't tell you certain things because you need that time to get it more precise. But with the birth time and everything else I just mentioned, my accuracy is very high, 95% or higher. I always say about 95%. I always ask my clients, so was I right? Was I about 95? They usually say you were actually higher. So I couldn't do this unless this had scientific things to it. It's been around for thousands of years. It's not a hard science. It's an esoteric science, but it's definitely a science, and it's an interpreted art. So I look at it a lot like acupuncture. 50 years ago, acupuncture was not part of the medical community and part of our insurance plans. And someone would say, this is ridiculous. You're putting a needle in my knee in order to help the pain in my neck. Well, astrology is very much like acupuncture because it lays out the pattern and shows the examples of how to fix and make that pattern at the highest vibrational level possible. And with acupuncture, you could go to 20 acupuncturists and get a different result. Same thing with astrology, because it's an interpreted art. It's different than hard science in that way.
Yeah, it's fascinating. How do you know if the interpretation if one is better than the other? It's just by credibility?
You would really want to go to someone who you've heard good things about, or, for me, most of my clients come to me through word of mouth, or they get referred by doctors. At one point, I had 6 neurologists in my class learning how to read astrology charts because they had become clients of mine and they saw my accuracy level and they wanted to know, how did you do that so that we can help our patients?
Right.
So I'm very, very interested in working with doctors and scientists because I love showing them how this works and how helpful it can be. And I really hope one day that every doctor knows how to read a chart just to get the blueprint, the owner's manual of the patient you're dealing with. It's very, very important to do that.
So how does medical astrology help identify these health predispositions or vulnerabilities in an individual's birth chart?
So there are a lot of things that I look for. I'm not going to get into all the astrological language of what I'm looking for, because probably that's going to be boring to most people. But I'm going to use a metaphor to describe what I do. So pretend that you're a car and you come into my shop, and I'm going to look at your 4 tires. Most of us are driving around with 4 tires that are properly inflated. But a lot of us were born with a completely flat tire. The tires are represented by elements: fire, earth, air, and water. So in my case, I was born with 1 flat tire with my vehicle, and I'm completely missing air. So what this means is that if I don't put air into my life with intention, I will feel like a car stuck on the side of the road with a flat tire. And what happens to a body that's missing an element is that it becomes the weaker part of your body unless you know how to take care of it. So for me, I had sinus surgery twice. That's all about breathing in air. Really bad claustrophobia, which is all about being trapped in no air. I don't breathe particularly well. Even though I'm an athlete, people will tell you that the one thing I don't like it if people say to me, Leslie, slow down, just take a deep breath. It's like I don't do air really well. So I know I've got a problem, not a problem that's not, permanent. I just have to be aware of it. So what I do is make sure I do lots of yoga, which is all about breathing. I can handle that. I don't want to take a breath workshop, even though it would be really good for me. And I need to be outside. I need to live in a place with high ceilings. I need to be able to look out. So I have to add air into my life. So flying on airplanes is really good for me. And I've got a friend who has a bird. Anything from the air element helps me put air in that flat tire. So we start with that, looking at the elements. A lot of people who have 0 earth are either known for their bodies, like all the beauty queens like Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor, some of the Kardashians, they have zero earth. And you actually become an expert and really known for the very thing that you're missing. So they're all known as being beautiful because the earth is the body. But it can also show that you're out of whack with your body too. And like for me, without the air, I'm an astrologer, which is all about air and space. So you see, it's like nothing is ever totally good or bad, but knowing your elemental makeup is incredibly important. I've taught a class about this, and I teach people how, even if you don't want to know how to read an astrology chart, how to just find that out so that you can add that missing element, or if you're low, add it into your life, whether it's fire, earth, air, or water. And then the other thing that I can look at, I can see trauma. I'm pretty much a trauma expert at this point. A lot of times people have health issues that stem from childhood trauma that they just thought was no big deal. Because when you're 4 or 5 years old and something really traumatic happens to you, you don't have the words at that age to explain the trauma. So the body has a memory of these traumas. And if that original core memory is not helped, the body will keep replicating something similar until you become 40 years old and all of a sudden you've got this blown up health issue and the doctors are like, what the heck is the matter with you? So just to give you an example of that, I was teaching at Rancho La Puerta in Mexico, and I've been teaching there for over 20 years. And in the audience was the head of integrative medicine at NYU, and he came out of curiosity, not knowing anything about astrology. And he said, look, I've got some patients that I can't figure out what's the matter with them. He said, can we try sending them to you? And the first one he sent to me was a woman who's now one of my biggest fans. And she had something called tension myositis syndrome. I don't know if you guys know of the work of Dr. John Sarno, but she had a really horrible trauma happen to her when she was younger. And it became this all over body achy kind of uncomfortable thing that was going on that nobody was able to treat. She was absolutely miserable. So once we got to the root cause of the problem, then we can treat that. And I'm really big about using EMDR therapy to help people with childhood trauma. I don't know if you guys know what EMDR is. That's eye motion technique for bilateral brain stimulation that literally goes into the brain and finds where in the brain you started looping with trauma. So people need to understand trauma under the age of 5 and under, sometimes even 6. Anyone who's had surgery under that age, they automatically have a case of post-traumatic stress disorder that a lot of times goes untreated. So we have to get back into what happened to the body at a very young age and start healing that part of the brain. The brain is a physical thing too, and we sometimes forget that there are ways to rebalance that. So I could go on and on. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. I have a question. So with a child that has a physical trauma, if they don't have surgery, but let's say they have a broken bone, is that considered something that would cause this ongoing trauma in their life? Or does it have to be something where it's surgical?
Well, the surgical one is 100%. You can read the book by Peter Levine about healing trauma. They've done enough studies on children who go under anesthesia under the age of 5 and under, and that's never really the best thing. But a lot of times you have no choice. You have to do it. So, but you want to know how to rebalance the child after that surgery. And that's very, very important. But usually things that are not surgical, like, for example, I had a client who had so many problems with her sexual organs, and just relationships were really difficult. And she had been in therapy for 20 years and nobody could figure out what had happened. And I saw in her chart the aspect for rape or something, some kind of violation to her private parts, which could have been an abortion, a hysterectomy. It doesn't mean it was rape. But for 50 minutes, she kept saying, no, nothing happened to me. And then I found out that when she was 5, all of a sudden, because the chart never lies. It may take me a while to figure out what the problem is, but I never give up. At age 5, this child went down a metal slide and there was a piece of metal sticking up and it literally in her private part, going with her mother to a doctor who had to sew her up with stitches. And yeah, technically she wasn't raped and it wasn't anything that a normal therapist would ever think about, because at age 5, even she had discounted it. And I said, no, I said, that was traumatic. That was difficult. And I said, we need to work on, because when I started talking to her about it, her throat started closing up. She got all emotional. I said, this is the root cause. It's like we at 5 years old, we don't have the words to describe, hey, Mom, that was really traumatic to have that man, sawing me up down there.
Wow.
So it's super intense. And sometimes the solution is so deeply complicated and unusual. I could tell you stories that would just blow your mind. And there's no way a doctor or a therapist is going to figure that out, because the person they're talking to doesn't even know it.
So when you're looking at someone's chart and you're looking into, where this happened, when it happened, how to get to the root of it, are there planetary influences as well? Like when we think of astrology, we think of how, the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, and how their movement, affects our life. So what are the roles of the planets and the transitions in all of this?
So let's get back to the car analogy. We're driving around a car. We got 4 tires. Some of us were born with a flat tire like me. We've got an owner's manual in the glove compartment. It just tells us the best way to operate that vehicle. That's what an astrology reading should be about, how to read the way that you're designed so that you have compassion for the way you were designed. Like if you're a Jeep and you wish you were a Ferrari, you can't change what you are. So we got to learn to love what we are. And like I said, the language of compassion is what astrology is, because we have to accept what we are. That owner's manual in your car glove compartment does not predict the future, but it can in a way say things like, well, like Leslie, if you don't put air in your tire, you're going to end up on the side of the road. Or if you're putting diesel in your gas engine, I'm going to predict you're going to break down. So in that sense, if you don't follow the code, which is, the name of your company, if you don't follow the code of what makes you vibrate at the highest level, you will have health problems. All right. So that's why reading the chart is so incredibly important. So as you're driving down the highway of life, that's your natal chart. That's how that all works. But we also have, to answer your question, Lisa, we have weather. Right now, there are cosmic patterns. We are under the influence of where all these planets are at the moment. And whenever anyone says, well, that's ridiculous, how does that work? And I say, well, listen, the moon is literally a rock in space, just like all the other planets. They're just rocks in space that are basically having an influence on us. So a moon, when it's full, it's going to pull all the water on Earth. And that's why the tides go up and down according to the cycles of the moon. And our bodies are like 80% water. So it doesn't mean we're going to go, crazy during a full moon, even though the word lunatic comes from the word. Most words are from the planets. So we have this huge history of being connected with these rocks in space, because we live in this electromagnetic universe and we are like music. We are the music of the spheres of these rocks. They're doing their song up there. So you're driving down the highway of life. You've got your own piece of music in your glove compartment, but then you've got music coming at us at the same time, which is why I was able to predict the COVID virus before it came. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I said, I know it's some kind of trauma having to do with the element of air. Let's face it, virus travels through the air and it's invisible, just like air is. I knew it wasn't an earthquake or a, tornado. Well, tornado could be air too, but it was something big. And I said, it's going to affect all of us, and life as we know it will be forever changed and our world shut down. So astrology is really important right now, because we're in such crazy times. Astrology can bring peace, because if you understand you're part of a bigger system, it can make sense of the craziness that's going on. So that's what I think is so important about my goal in teaching astrology. I want people to understand how this works and how they can use it in their day-to-day life. And That's why I set up my school called the Astrology Wisdom Academy. And so if anyone's interested in learning from me, I love to teach because I make it simple and I don't use astrological language to teach because that'll just bore you to death.
And I love that aspect because I think that one of the things that's so important is getting to know yourself. And one way to do that is medical astrology. Another way to do it is to, have genetic testing done. And then you're looking at both the physical components and the spiritual components. And then together, you can map out what you need to restore balance to the body. So I love that.
Yeah, I think now that we're getting more advanced as a species in some ways, and in some ways maybe not, but right now, there are a lot of people who are very open to alternative healing methods because they're finding that they really do work. And I think that it's just going to keep growing and growing because sometimes Western medicine doesn't have all the answers. And that's why doctors send people to me because they will admit, I don't know what's going on here. What am I missing? And we can get that one clue so that the doctor can then help. That's a huge thing. And it happens quickly. That's the beauty of astrology. It works fast.
I'm sitting here listening to you and I have so many questions going on in my mind that I want to ask, but I really want to bring it back to how did you get involved in this? Because this isn't something that, you're taught necessarily in school. So what brought you to astrology?
When I was 19, my mom sent me to an astrologer because I'd had health issues my whole life and I was probably very troubled in her mind, and I think I was very troubled. And this woman basically changed my life. She knew who I was and she said, look, you have a very complicated, gnarly chart, but if you stay on the pathway that I'm going to suggest you stay on, you can have an incredible life. And she said, you're an artist, you're a writer, you're a healer, you can be an astrologer, but you need to start doing these things that you're born to do. And at the time, I had been told I had no artistic talent, and I ended up doing everything she said, and I became a very successful designer. I was famous in Japan. She told me my work would first be picked up overseas. I was a designer for Takashimaya for over 11 years, which is like the Neiman Marcus of Japan. I have no training in art, by the way, at all, self-taught. And then I wrote and illustrated over 20 children's picture books that have sold over 2 million copies all over the world. She told me all of this would happen as well. Then the astrology part happened in 2008. I had been studying astrology on my own since I was 19 because I was so fascinated. Like, how does she know me? I knew everything she said was right. And I wanted to prove that she was right. I wanted this amazing future that she was describing for me was going to be true. And I just decided this is no accident that I that my mother introduced me to this woman, and I started to study. And then in 2008, when the recession hit and the publishing world died, I realized, wow, I really should think about doing something else besides writing children's books. And that's when I decided to try to be an astrologer, but I was very reluctant. I didn't really want to do this work. Can you imagine going from drawing little happy puppy dogs playing and butterflies in the garden, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to deal with a total stranger and talk about incredible traumas that have happened to them and help them I was terrified in the beginning. It's a huge responsibility to look at someone's chart. You have to be very, very careful who you go to, because if they say something that's scary or predictive or like I've had some clients who've told me, astrologers have said, well, you're never going to get married. You don't want to hear that when you're 34 years old. By the way, it's never true. It's not, you have the free will to change and outgrow your chart, but you want to make sure that you find people who are deeply good with words and kind, because otherwise an astrologer can just say one sentence that if they upset you, it's hard to unhear certain things. And so I take it very seriously, and I train my students to do it the way I do it, which is with incredible compassion and understanding. And even if you have difficult things to explain to people, you do it always with solutions and help. Because as I said, I have a difficult chart. But I don't look at it as bad. If I didn't have a difficult chart, I wouldn't be a good astrologer because I understand human suffering and pain. And so there's always something good, even if it doesn't look it.
Lisa always says that. She always says there's two sides of the coin, and there really is. So one of the things that I love is that you teach this also, and you have a school, but you also work with universities, don't you?
Well, I've taught at Columbia University. They have a school of spiritual studies. I've been interviewed on the podcast of Dr. Tracy Stein, who is very interested in the work that I'm doing. But that's pretty much the only university that I've worked with. But yes, both Dr. Tracy Stein and many other doctors. I mean, at one point, I think I had 20 doctors that I was working with. This is a very exciting thing to know that there are doctors that are open to this. And hopefully with time, it'll become more and more common. And I wish one of the area of life that I'd really love to help out with is the people who are in recovery, trying to figure out how can we help heal why they started to turn to alcohol or drugs. Because again, I'm about the root cause. If you can't find the root cause, then we're just treating symptoms all the time. So I think there's I think there's a big use for astrology and many things. I think it should be used in the school systems for understanding why kids are the way they are. Some people are really, really tough, and it's not their fault. They just are. You know, I look at people as if they're animals. You know, a crocodile is a fine animal, but you don't want it as a pet. So the crocodile can't help what it is. I feel like humans are the same. And, you know, a basset hound is never going to win a road race with a greyhound, even though they're both from the hound family. They have very different designs. And we're exactly the same. We're animals. We're no different than any other animal out there. What we want to do, though, is put the alligator where it belongs and put the greyhound where it belongs. And that's what astrology could do. And imagine how much this could help with doing the charts, especially for teenagers. These poor kids right now are so confused by everything, and they're been socially isolated because of COVID, and they're on their phones all the time. How about using astrology to get them to understand what the highest version of their life could look like? And give them a roadmap. Let them go down that path. Saves for a lot of aggravation, because without it, I don't know what would have happened to me at age 19. I always say I think that astrologer saved my life, because I could have very easily gotten stuck on the side of the road and not been able to restart my engine.
I would love to see this in every integrative medical program. Every holistic health coach should take a course. Every practitioner, anyone that's involved in healthcare, and especially psychology, because that really will help give somebody a greater understanding of that individual, and then they can guide them and help them on a deeper level. How are you going to get this out there in such a big way?
I'm doing podcasts, doing whatever I can. I believe that hopefully they'll find me. I just do as much as I can to get the word out, but I totally agree with what you're saying. I've had a few psychologists take my course so that they can use it with their patients, but it hasn't been a huge thing. A lot of them don't have time. I mean, these therapists are so busy right now. Taking on something like learning astrology seems a little too much, but I know that in 8 hours, just taking my beginner 101 class, in 8 hours, I can get the person up and running to know how to read the basic wiring of a human being. And I would think that's incredibly important. Just knowing the elemental balance of a person is super, super important to know.
You know, we always talk about getting to the root cause in holistic wellness. And what you're doing is it's the beginning. You know, it's not the root. It is the root, but it's the day you were born, the time you were born on this earth. And it's the beginning of who you were. So I think we could continue and talk for hours. Leslie, you.
I had so much to share. I feel like I'm like bursting, and
I know. I could pick your brain all day.
And we have a lot of different people on our show, and very, very interesting people. This is one of the first times that I'm sitting here. My jaw is open. I'm like waiting for the next sentence to come out of your mouth. So we would love to have you come back and be a guest on another episode of our show and talk more in depth about everything. We're very excited for all of our listeners to hear about you and what your gift that you have and that you're going to be bringing to the world. So before we end, if people want to take your course or to learn more about medical astrology, where can they find you?
They can just email me directly at leslie@lesliemcguirk.com. Go to my website. There's lots of information on my website about everything I'm doing. And I'm about to set up my Astrology Wisdom Academy website. I've been so busy with other things that I've been teaching, but not actually doing that website. So that's coming soon as well. And one other thing I was going to say, which would be great, is to actually have some of the people who have had very serious health problems who I helped in 1 hour, have them actually talk and explain what happened when they had these readings with me, because I can tell you guys all day long about what I've done, but it's even more powerful to hear it from the actual people. And it's very incredible to know that in 1 hour you could change someone's life. And I will tell you, I've done it many times, and that's a huge honor. I don't take it lightly, but I also feel deeply grateful to that woman at 19 who saved my life. And I'm trying to pay it forward and be in service. I mean, it's really important for me to stay clear that this is a gift that I've got, and I really want to help people. Want the people who can't seem to figure out why they're not getting better to give it a try. Usually I'm very successful with helping people, so it's a good thing.
I look forward to having you read my chart, that's for sure. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Leslie.
It's a pleasure, God. So when I met you in Boulder on that hike.
I know.
It was fun.
It was meant to be. It was meant to be.
All right, awesome. Well, we'll see you again. Thank you.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Leslie. Thanks for listening to the C3 podcast. Find past episodes and subscribe on our website, codehealthshop.com, or Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube.
The Code Girls appreciate discussing conscious living with inspiring guests who make a difference.
Remember, conscious living starts with conscious conversations. Until next time, be intentional, stay inspired, practice gratitude, be well, and feel the drop.